Good morning from London, a cold London, as you can see from my jacket and my hoodie. Temperature dropped down, so we are properly in autumn. That is actually is quite nice. I like the season. I like the change in colors and. It makes me feel when autumn and winter comes makes me feel calm. It's interesting how there was a period in my life where when this season would took place, I would start to get really depressed because summer was gone, the sun was gone. But slowly, when I began to try to learn how to be in peace with him, like this learning process about find your summer within. That is a long journey that I don't think it will finish in this lifetime. But since I began that journey, actually autumn and winter became a nice time, like where actually from feeling depressed and sad started to make me feel calm and more restful. So it is interesting how working on ourselves, how we actually can change what we feel toward things. But what I wanted to talk about this morning, it's about an article that I wrote a while ago and I did share many times. And while I'm just preparing to write about and talk about a meeting I had the other day with this girl that told me to be able to have a out of body, and she told me about all the things that she experiences every time she goes out of her body. So I'm gonna start to write it down and then make a video about it. But I wanna do it properly because it was a really interesting, a really interesting meeting. But like what I'm talking about this morning, it's about Bradley. I talk about him many times. The reason is because Bradley, sorry guys, but and girls, human beings, yeah, so we got everyone. Sorry about, you know, this is a bit cold. I caught a little bit of a cold. So, so yeah, so just 'cause in the past I got someone complaining about my, yeah, it's like doing this sound with the nose. So, Bradley has been, so this guy, I met this guy in Australia. And why it's so important is because he, what happened with this guy is set everything for what then for that for what lead me to this moment, because meeting this guy made me questioning the so-called reality so badly at the time, that then obviously led to many other questions. I was already in that kind of like journey. I mean, wasn't nothing like now, but there was things that happened before that made me questioning. But that obviously was like, what the fuck, right? It was like the what the fuck moment that like it could not let me kind of like, dismissed as a random coincidence. It took me a long time before I actually started to seriously focus on try to figure it out what is mine and our existence. And that's why talk about this guy many times, and actually every time I'm talking with someone about the coin, like synchronicities, about what if they say coincidences, I always tell about this story and some others, but the one about Bradley was like now obviously wonderful. It was perfectly organized in a way that there was no way you could just say it's a coincidence, even for the most skeptical. I mean, I met Bradley, for who doesn't know the story, in Australia in 2006. I arrived in Australia from Italy, in this new adventure where I could not even speak English except very basic words, and everything was a new world, a new adventure, and I ended up in this hostel called Gilday Hostel, in Forest Street, I think, in an area called King's Cross. And this guy showed up a day, I think it was already a few weeks I was there, with a huge electric piano, and claiming that to have lost a flight, to have missed the flight to back to New Zealand, where he was coming from, and that he would stay few days and then take the next flight back to New Zealand. So in the next few days, we start to get to know him, and he was an artist, playing in bars, and half Aboriginal and half Maori, and he was a really nice guy, like extremely chatting, like extremely. But slowly we started to see another side of him, where when he was very drunk, he would become very aggressive. So where he ended up having many arguments with the other backpackers in the hostel, except me, where he always strangely was very nice. So after I think a few weeks, where there was obviously many happenings, with him arguing with everyone all the time, and then like the day after, being completely fine, like nothing happened, chatting, and then getting at night, getting drunk, and getting on arguments, a discussion, to the point that everybody hated him. Again, I never had any problems. He always been extremely nice to me, and so even when he was drunk, it's always been really good to me. So the few days, that he told us that he would stay became like few weeks, until one evening, going back to the hostel from work. It was funny because actually that work was a work at the time I got, where I lie to what I could do. It's actually, I got this job as a waiter, where I claim to have a lot of years experience, where in my life I never worked as a waiter before. And I remember doing this trial shift, and unable to carry more than one plate, and it was funny, and but I didn't like it. was so posh. It was a horrible place. And I think that night, I think actually I got the job, but then I decided to not go. It's not a place for me. Whereas rich people are, uh, they are not my environment. Never been my environment. But anyway, I go back to the hostel, and there was police outside. So I go in, run inside, check if my laptop was fine. You know, because I thought because the street was quite dodgy, a lot of drug addicts, a lot of prostitutes. So like it already happened before that someone broke in and stole stuff. So I know I ran inside to be sure that everything was fine and nothing was missing. And so when I got inside, the guys told me that there was, there have been a massive argument between Bradley and the French guy. Bradley took a knife, shouting to the guy to stab him, to the point that, everybody panicking, and him dropping the knife and running away. And obviously, they called the police. And he was gone. He was gone. He was gone, like leaving behind basically everything, because apparently he left behind his piano, electronic piano, his backpack, everything. So I was not expecting to see him ever again after, but the day after, I was at the ground floor where there was the toilets, and so the toilet has a little window that it gives you, like, basically it's on the side road, is on the back street of where the hostel was, and it was open. So, and I think I don't know, taking a shit, sitting on the toilet, and all of a sudden I had pop in. It was him, and I was like, hey, he looked at me and he shouted that he would took his revenge toward all of them, and but that I had to be, like, no, I didn't have to be worried because I was the only one that he liked. He said he was the only good one, and then he disappeared. I was like, fuck. So, went back in the room, woke up the other backpackers, told them, like, look, at Bradley's like this, so a bit of dramas. And this fucking, like, and didn't see him for I think for a month. Only to basically to bump on him again during the gay pride in Sydney. And we were, like marching, and I actually I see him in sitting with other guys in a gay bar, basically is an area of Sydney, like, where is like there's a big like a gay, lesbian, transgender community, like here in London it's Soho. I think that is called Oxford Street, something like Oxford Street, Oxford Road, but it's like in Sydney. And they kind of like seeing him there, kind of like makes me understand, kind of like I understand why probably he always was nice to me. I kind of like assumed that probably he liked me, and that was the reason why I was the only one. He was so nice. So, I made sure that he wouldn't see me, and kind of like sneak out, and keep marching, and then obviously go back, in the evening, heading back to the hostel. I tell everyone, look, Bradley is around, is there, blah blah blah. And at that that seemed for a while to be the end. So many other things happen. Ran out of money. Um, Thanks to another Italian guy that lent me some money at the time because I couldn't find any job. It was just after Christmas. There was no jobs available. I didn't speak English, and I had no money. So this Italian guy, he lends me some money. Uh, it, I go with him in Griffith. There's a small, dodgy Italian Australian town at the hedge, just before the outback would begin. 10 hours from Sydney, 5 hours from Canberra. Then, I do a month, save some money, move back to Sydney, meet a French guy, a Swiss guy, and with them I joined them for a trip through the east coast of Australia, from Sydney to Byron Bay, and with the intention for me to then go to Bundaberg in Byron Bay. Something happened where the guys I was traveling with decided to steal the surfboard, and where they were, seen by the owners. So because Byron Bay is small, so they had to leave the town, earlier than we planned. We were supposed to stay, I think, 1 or 2 more days. So even that, another small adventure, because I was really pissed. So it's kind of like I tell them, look, I'm not coming. So they leave, and I get the first bus from Byron Bay to Bundaberg. And in Bundaberg, I met my uncle and auntie. And then the other important story of my life journey begins. I was in the hostel, as I told many times. I met Kaori, this beautiful Japanese woman there, and not just beautiful, it was her soul was beautiful. Her soul was pure, and she took my hand and guided me, I always say, to the other side of the bridge, where this amazing journey is still going. But so anyway, I spent almost 1 year in Bundaberg, and then with Kaori, we decided to move to Perth. Perth, it's 3 hours flight from Bundaberg, from Queensland. And in the meantime, since I left Sydney, it was, I think, like almost just over a year. So we arrived in Perth, and we stayed in a hostel at the beginning, obviously, while searching for an accommodation. And in the meantime, Kaori was back to Japan visiting family, and I was alone in a hostel in Perth. And one evening, I was watching football with 2 Scottish guys that I had no idea what they were talking about. Like, for me, that at the time, I started to understand Australian. I speak English. For me, that was like another foreign language. But anyway, we were just watching football when I hear a voice from the entry of the hostel, a voice that was familiar, because I turned around, boom, Bradley was there. He was bloody Bradley. After more than 1 year, I find him in Perth, 3 hours flight, literally it's 3 hours flight from Sydney as well, completely on the opposite coast of Australia. So you already, you think about it. This guy, all he done, all that happened, you end up in the same hostel amongst all the hostels that it was in Perth. He comes in the same hostel where you are, in opposite place, opposite side of Australia. So you can imagine, like, it's like, what the hell is going on? Like for me, it was already like, whoa, what happening here? So anyway, like after the first shock, I start to talk to him, and it's like, asking why he was there, like, and he tells me like, my sister lives here, and I came to visit her, but the husband don't like me, and so I had to find a hostel. Then it turns out that an Australian guy on benefit living in the hostel, in a night out in a bar, met him and took him back to stay with him in the hostel. So you can imagine, right? Okay, yes, you can kind of like, because at the time I wasn't still, like, I had some strange happenings with what we call it synchronicities, right? But nothing really big that would make me like, like what's going on. So I said, all right, it's fine, what can happen, right? But then, like it was a week or maybe 2 weeks, and at the time I was working in a coffee shop in this area of Perth. It's no Perth, I can't remember the name. It was nice, nice cafe inside the. Oh my God, this where they sell plants. They sell plants, seeds, flowers, and they had a coffee shop. The manager was an Italian Australian, really lovely. He was a Christian, and he was really nice guy. He always gave me like great advice about relationship. That obviously at the time I didn't understand, and I would laugh about it. But then growing up, it really made me reflect a lot about what at the time he said, and made me realize at some point that he was completely right. So that's why it's very important, the power of planting seeds, because you try to planting seeds in someone, it might nothing, might seems that nothing is happening, but their seeds eventually will bloom. But it's thanks to the seeds that someone can change it in better. So that's why it's very important, like even like you don't have to try to change them, but just sharing your experience, just sharing your beliefs, it's already enough, because people like your stories will stay in their subconscious, and eventually when the time is right they will remember, and probably the stories will help them. So that's why it's very important, share who you are, what you believe. Anyway, one morning get to work, and the manager comes to greet me and say, oh Alex, come with me, we have a new cook that I want to introduce you. And as I get in the kitchen, wow, like I couldn't believe it. my eyes. I literally couldn't believe my eyes. The new cook was Bradley, and I was speechless because for me it was like, yeah, okay. I met this guy in Sydney Fair. I been around a bit around Australia, traveling, working. I end up in Perth. He shows up in my same hostel, and then it's, and then you can say whatever, like coincidence is a coincidence, right? But you can't tell me it's a coincidence when the same person end up in your workplace just few weeks after you meet him again after more than a year inside your same hostel. Like, you can't call it coincidence. There is obviously, even I believe that even the most, hard mindset, the most skeptical, the most rational person won't deny that there is something now that is not does not make sense, or at least in the way we've been taught what makes sense is. So obviously, I, like, I tell him like how the hell he ended up in my same workplace after like he ended up being my same hostel, and he tells me like it was that was the other things that really always stayed in my head. In both cases, in the hostel and in the cafe, he acted like there was nothing strange in that. He acted like it was the most normal things ever to meet someone in one city, meet again in another city, and a few weeks later, and they end up going to work in the same place. It was the most normal things for him. There was nothing weird in that. And asking like, I thought you were like an artist, right? You play piano. You can't. That's how I met you in Sydney. And now he tells me like, oh well, like when I don't have a jobs, and I need to make a living. I know how to cook, so I work as a cook as well. So for me, there was like a lot of questions because obviously that wasn't the real, like first, like woo moment, like it's already, I already had in the past some like, synchronicities that already, it was a seed, already there were seeds planted in my subconscious. But this was, obviously because the contest and it was like the one that could not be dismissed, and that it did change completely the way I saw the so-called coincidences in a completely different way to what now I know now not to be, without a reason, but to always carry with them a meaning. So, as I said many times, sometime you might understand why it's happening. Sometime you don't, but sometime the only reason is to make you questioning, as I believe was the case with Bradley. Like meeting him was what I needed to seriously take a different direction to where I was heading. It took many years, again, as I said at the beginning of the video, it took many years before I actually, then I keep walk in the right direction, you know, and not stepping back. But Bradley, after I think it was like after 2 or 3 weeks, you know, that where he did restart doing the same things he did when we met in Sydney, you know, arguing with the backpackers, getting drunk. And again, one day, disappear. That as well, that as well was, you know, strange. I mean, one day I asked about Bradley in the hostel and he was gone. Was gone. Nobody knew anything. Didn't know where or why he left. The day after I go to work and he was gone. The manager tells me that he didn't know what was going on. He didn't show up. He didn't call. He literally disappeared. And since then, never seen him again. Obviously, I always wish the day that I would meet him again. I might, you know, I might meet him. I might not. I mean, if you believe in life after this life, yeah, you know, I'm gonna meet him again for sure. But in this lifetime, I guess if it's meant to be, if there is a reason, I will meet him again. Otherwise, he did his job, and that's it. It is a beautiful memory. Have a good day, guys. Have a good day, guys and girls. Human beings, as we all are, in this illusion we call reality. Have a nice day.